Welcome to the Style in My Mind podcast. On this show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of fashion and psychology with the world's most inspiring people. Our mission is to unlock the power to become the best version of yourself by turning their wisdom and knowledge into practical advice. Most of you have probably seen The Devil Wears Prada, but how much of it is real? Is the fashion industry really as toxic as it is made out to be? So, today, we're thrilled to delve into the world of fashion. I'm your host, Jennifer Heinen, and I'm excited to introduce our guest, Kate Claridge. Kate is a fashion professional with over 20 years of industry experience, progressing from the shop floor to roles such as product developer and product manager. Throughout her career, she assisted many creative directors. Her passion for mental health and psychological safety within the industry led her to become a fellow fashion psychologist. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Kate, starting straight away, can you tell us a bit about your background and where your passion for changing the fashion industry from inside comes from?
So when I was young, I always wanted to be a fashion designer. Like it was no question. It was really obvious this is what I wanted to do. However, when I got to the point of going to college at 16, I got accepted into London College Fashion, and I just found it very intimidating. And I just thought, oh God, this isn't for me. This is awful. I can't stand it. So I ended up going to work straight away in the industry, doing like little jobs like measuring men for suits. Then I worked in a fashion house, like a wholesale that sold to Miss Selfridge, and I worked on the reception desk. And it all sort of started from there, working at the back of Oxford Street in the rag trade, really gritty in the 90s. It was like, it was fun, but crazy. I learned a lot, and it sort of just went on from there. So I went into sales. I went into like doing sort of bits and bobs with technical, like QC, and I was just supporting basically everybody. Then from there, because in fashion, it can be quite unreliable and companies open and close all the time. So then from there, I went into corporate clothing, and I actually did like customer services, and then moved into production. And it was when I was doing customer services there, and I was speaking to other people, and it was actually a really good company to work for. They suggested I went to college in the evening and did my BA in fashion management. So I did my education alongside my working. So that's how comes I have this amount of experience, but I do also have the education. I had a great time at the Duck of St. George. I always sort of say it was the best of times and the worst of times. I've met some great people in my travels, and I've always just really liked the design of the clothes. But I moved towards the fit and construction. So I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none.
But that's a good skill to have now, because you have to kind of broaden your aspect. Like that's what I noticed when I went into my career doing fashion design and also styling. The broader I got, the more I could do, which opened up for more opportunities within the business and within the industry. So that's great. And it's also very good to know, especially for the listeners who don't necessarily want to go straight into a degree, that they can start out somewhere. And it's very inspirational. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I did have a situation where when I finished at the fashion house in the beginning, the buyers of Topshop at the time wanted to take me, thought I was good at what I did, but couldn't because I didn't have a degree, because that was a requirement to work in a buying office. So I just carried on without even thinking about it. And then I got to the point where I was hitting a wall, and it was suggested to me as part of my development in the corporate wear that it would benefit me if I did go. And I don't regret it. It made me refined, where I was quite rough around the edges from working in the rag trade. It actually sort of refined me and sort of gave me sort of a direction, and I became a lot more professional from, believe it or not. I think it was the best way for me to go, without a doubt, was do college at night and work during the day.
Yeah, it requires also a certain amount of discipline and adherence to your time schedule. And that brings so many skills with it that a lot of people don't necessarily get just doing a BA. So it's great. And thank you so much for sharing that. So you have had an extensive career close to the product. What motivated you to transition from that extensive work in fashion to pursuing a master's in fashion psychology? Because that's slightly different. How has this shift influenced your career?
During my whole career, I would come across people and not really understand why they behaved a certain way. It's not a surprise to me or to like work with like the Devil Wears Prada and stuff. This is technically true. It is very cutthroat. It is very competitive, and people would act and do things that would just baffle me. Just didn't agree with a lot of some of the behavior I'd come across, and it piqued my interest of like, why is this person doing this or doing this to someone else, or why are they acting a certain way? Why are they saying these things? The things that I'd witnessed was quite intense in certain areas. As much as I do have good fond memories, I also have horrendously terrible memories of certain things that have happened. Sexual harassment, racism, discrimination of all kinds. So I would then look up, why did this person do this? Why is this happening? And why is this in this industry so predominant? It didn't matter sort of where I went and who I spoke to. Even if I went to an event and spoke to, say, a buyer from a different office or something, I would hear the similar stories. Like it was quite prevalent and no one wanted to discuss it. So I would look up everyone's behavior. And then during the pandemic, I came across someone that was a senior member of staff that was probably the most toxic person I'd ever met in my life. And I was constantly looking up how to deal with them, their behavior, why do they do it? It was the most baffling behavior, because they would do a lot of things with a smile on their face, and that you really didn't know what was going on because you were sort of there in a circle. And it was very, very, like, now looking back, realizing how toxic it was. So my friend suggested, who also works in the industry, why don't you do fashion psychology? Why don't you go down this road? Because I needed a break. Like, it was getting to the point where I was going to suffer horrendous burnout if I didn't do something about it. Because the hours that you're asked to work, and especially in the pandemic, we were being told, we're saving the company, you're doing everything to save the company. And I was working till 2 a.m. It was getting ridiculous. So I decided enough is enough. Then the whole company restructured, which then just gave me the opportunity to go, right, okay, where am I going next? What am I doing? So that's when my friend suggested fashion psychology. I don't even think I read the blurb of the course. I think I just went, that's it then, I'm going to do it. I didn't sort of realize that obviously fashion psychology is very broad, and that you can do consumer behavior, you can have a look at like why we wear what we wear, all of these things like the sustainable behavioral gaps and things like that, where I was the only one looking at, why do we treat the people the way we treat people? Why is this acceptable? Why are we fine with this? So that's what led me to do this study, and this to just start the talk, start having the conversation, because no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to admit that this goes on. We talk about it to each other. Everyone knows it. Everyone, oh yeah, fashion's really tough. But it's like they just gloss over and they have no recollection. It's like they don't want to admit it. It's like a unicorn or something, like it's a mythical creature. It's like, what's wrong with talking about the fact that we treat each other appallingly, and why? And how do we stop it?
I think it's actually really important to talk about it and start the conversation. I'm so glad that I have you on, because also for the listeners who might be interested in following into the footstep of fashion psychology and going into that route. Here you have two fashion psychologists talking with each other, going into completely different directions. I'm focused in my research in cognitive psychology and looking at all of the emotional regulation aspects and memory in my personal research. You are looking into behavioral and trying to change the industry within. It's super inspiring, and there's a lot of change to be done through this coursework and through this gaining of knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing. I also know it's quite tough to talk about quite toxic things, because we always try to, stay focused on positive things, but breaking down barriers we only do by potentially getting cut. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way. So yeah, I also know personally from my own experience, the fashion industry is known for its very, very high pressure environments. Can you speak to, without saying any names, to specific toxic behaviors that you have observed in fashion workplaces that have impacted a lot of people?
I can talk from also myself and also the people that I interviewed for my study. Because when I put this study out there, like this is what I'm going to do, the overwhelming response that I got from people, because also I said it was anonymous, because I want people to be able to talk freely and not be able to get in any trouble or do any specific things. So I got such an overwhelming response of the treatment that they'd received. So during my own time, I've witnessed a lot of bullying and intimidation. The main sort of stem of everything is like competitiveness. So we are an oversaturated market. Everyone, I want to work in fashion. I want to work, like, it's like this glamorized thing, but realistically behind it, it's quite intense. Deadlines are, very strict, very tough, which breeds a whole situation of, bullying, exclusion, like an unhealthy competition that would lead people to do things in a certain way that would be outrageous. Like you would never do that anywhere else. You would get people that suffer from anxiety from it. Like I've seen people talking about other people's bodies. Oh, you look fat in that. Oh, well, you can't try on the samples. You're so fat. Like that would be normal conversation. That would be fine to say. They know what they're doing. They're trying to either bully you out of the place. Instead of having a frank conversation with you, they would have a conversation to say, you're rubbish, you're crap, you're this, you're that, like, why are you here? And then you'd have to go back to your desk and carry on. And with all of that, like, on you, I've had one of the people I interviewed had witnessed discrimination against dyslexia, like a learning disability. There was a quality control person, and he couldn't spell certain things, which is fine. I'm dyslexic. Most of the creative industry is dyslexic. And exactly like where they point out, and sort of this particular person had their spellings pointed out across the whole office as a shame, as an actual shame. So like during my study, I had to, in the end, break this down using the protected characteristics of the Equalities Act with like age discrimination. I was actually working somewhere where as soon as they found out my real age, it was like I'd caught a disease. I was no longer invited to the pub. I was no longer, because I was of this stature. It was very odd. Then I've interviewed a woman, a black woman who had had children. She was discriminated against not only for her race, but for having children and being a woman. When she went on a maternity, it's very unlikely you come back to your job exactly the same. They sort of, when you're training someone, you're thinking you're training someone to do your maternity cover. And while you're gone, they're told, well, this is your job. And then when that person comes back, they're given a junior role. this so happened that when I worked in one of the first fashion houses that I worked in, a buyer from a really big brand who we sold and bought from, she came in, she was fallen pregnant, and she came in and she cried. And it wasn't happy crying, like, you're pregnant, wow, you're having a baby. She cried because she thought her life was over and she was never going to be that level of buyer again. And that's why she cried. And then also, I interviewed someone, one of my participants was 11 weeks pregnant at the time. And she told me, my career is over. I know this and I haven't told them, and I can't bring myself to tell them I know it's over. But why would it be over for you having a baby? That's the kind of like things. Also, like the lack of diversity and inclusion within the industry. I think people don't realize that it's a very male dominated space. You think you're going into spaces that are women, because actually I think it's 80 or 85% of graduates are women in design. They only make up 14% of the actual top level of designers, because the others is men. There is still a massive imbalance of, like, why are these women, and all these women end up being like the managers of the actual floor of the studio and not the actual head designer. Like, it seems to be you've got to work that extra bit to get past. A lot of the companies are owned by men. These things are all going on, and we have an Equality Act. So why is it going on? How are they getting away with it? So then you look at HR and you go, okay, because back in the day you didn't have HR departments, and now you do. But everyone that I interviewed said HR had failed them, and HR were there to promote the company. And one of my participants were asked to sign an NDA in order to get her money. And all she did was raise the fact that she had been passed over for a bonus because the young manager took the bonus. And she wanted to know why it was my turn for the bonus. And because she complained, that was enough. Because you're in a vulnerable position, you end up signing the NDA and you end up taking the money and going. And that's happening all of the time, everywhere. The amount of information that I received during my study was overwhelming. I could talk about it all day.
I want to cut in here and just give to the listeners a little bit of advice here, because this is quite important for especially the young people who want to start or have maybe an interview lined up within the fashion industry. It is so important for you to look at the chance of this interview, also to interview it for you, the company for you. It's so important that you actually focus on behavioral questions towards the interviewer as well, because especially within the fashion industry, and it's not only just solely fashion design, it's in tech design, it's in production, it's in every single department. I personally got very lucky because I witnessed toxicity going on, but it never really affected me as much. So, and if it happened, I guess I always had quite thick skin and it never really bothered me. So that was always quite good. So I actually stepped out of the fashion industry with a bit of a healthier mindset, I guess, because I didn't really get completely sloshed under every actions, but I witnessed it being done to other people. And I also have to be quite frank here. It's my European white privilege that probably also put me into a positive position. The big downfall I had is I'm a woman and I'm of bigger body. So I'm not like a skinny fitting into the samples person. So for me, that was one of my negative parts. And I guess I came in with quite big confidence and knowing that I'm stable within myself to be able to look past that if people make comments. But it does still hurt. I mean, come on. And it does have effects on other people. So it's very tough. And I see why it's such a big mountain of work you have in front of you to try to change the industry within. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing specific instances and situations. And as everyone sees, the fashion industry is very much Devil Wears Prada and quite tough, if not even worse than how it was depicted.
as well.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to move into a little bit of a positive perspective of all of this, what do you think, considering of your case study and looking at your experiences personally, what does effective leadership look like in the fashion industry, and how can leaders foster a positive and inclusive work environment?
Well, I mean, this kind of goes for every industry because it is unfortunately the driving force of the toxic culture is the leadership. And not only that, if like what you've said, like if you have like lower self-esteem, you're actually more inclined to mirror the bad behavior of your manager. And then you'll take that forward because if you have low confidence, low self-esteem, you seem to think this is okay. So then that's how it continues to spread and continue. So by being like a more empowered manager, like raising the people up, because the competitive edge that the toxic leaders kind of, you must do this, you know, look at that person, they're doing it better than you, it creates the biggest toxic environment with the being competitive. And then when you have a competitive person in the team, it just doesn't work. It really doesn't. So therefore, if you are a manager that sees everyone as an individual and sees everyone that, you know, where is their potential, and you empower them rather than be pitting them off against each other, then you get the best out of them. They get the best out of you. And that's the way forward. So I think it's Adam Grant that does a lot of the, you know, how to be a great manager. I'd totally recommend like everything that man does, because it is just how you lead is how they will lead in the future. So you are setting an example. So you need to really think about, like, everyone is an individual, even in your team. You're not going to get all two people the same. This person works this way, this person works that way. Trying to fit everyone in the same box is just an absolute ridiculous situation. So raise up instead of bringing down or being competitive. So an empowered leader is probably the best way forward. For me and for my study, I would say that is the most effective way to like get people in the right place. What else is there? I think you've got to be resilient to change as a leader. A lot of people, it's like a power balance, and the egos need to be checked at the door. If you've got an ego and, you know, then you've got a problem. It's like what you were saying about how young people, when they go into interviews, they need to be asking culture questions. You need to be asking these questions because you kind of need to find out what kind of management you're going into, because they're going to dictate what happens. You've also have this situation where you have like a bad apple that can rise up from the bottom. A member of staff one person can drag the whole thing into a bad toxic culture. So you have to be wary of what team you're going into. So the right questions are important, or more cultural questions. But as regarding leadership, you've got to be a transparent, empowered leader. You've got to be able to have those conversations, give feedback in a more positive way. You know, a lot. I mean, you probably have had this as well, Jen. It's the feedback given in fashion can be so cutting. It can be absolutely like, you know, you've got a designer there designing they think they've done the most brilliant collection, and I've seen directors go in and just say it's rubbish and just throw it out the window. And, you know, when they could have sat down and gone, could this be a bit better? Could this be changed? Could, you know, just that slight calm down, have a nice normal conversation rather than everyone screaming at each other.
Because it's not necessarily only also the words that are cutting sometimes. The words are oftentimes the cutting thing. But I have to say, like, I witnessed one time where like the design overall of the collection was great, but there was like a few designs that were just not as good. And instead of like saying like, hey, can we rework this, or can we maybe, toss them? Because sometimes designers oftentimes make a very broad collection and you narrow it down, or you take components from different designs and put them together because it would bring a bit more cohesive look to what the directors are looking forward to, or the merchandisers are looking for. So but instead of just like saying like, hey, we need to just, like get rid of this. No, they woke up to the board and sloshed the paper right through the middle. And it's just like you see, like, as a designer, your baby getting ripped apart into pieces. And like, it's not even salvageable, it's like, and thrown away into the shredder. So it's just like the actions and the words in combination, sometimes separate. Like the silent treatment can be also really painful. I've heard of interns that, like, there are a few companies that have like a few interns on prem, but they don't necessarily have them allocated to a team, and they're just sitting there sketching all day. And then if you're lucky, because you had one design that someone liked, they pull you in, and then you're just a runner. So it can be like this glamorous life in the industry can be sometimes really tough. I, as an example, had a leader who was absolutely amazing. She was really focused on my growth and my development. And she gave me really a lot of constructive criticism. She also prefaced it that always with a compliment first. So she was always like, I see you're working really hard and I really appreciate that. Just speaking to that first up front, so you are aware that that's what I think of you as a whole. But there are a few things in the last couple of days that I need you to work on a little bit, because it just doesn't work with what I have envisioned for this team. And that kind of, it cushions the blow. And that's just so good, because it's helping me to feel empowered, but also, motivated, because motivation is super important. And especially if you have like the weeks leading up to the fashion week, you are working so many hours. You need to be motivated enough to get through this.
You do have to remember that it's just like, I've started to give the advice of, it's just clothes. Like it's just clothes. Because even though for some weird reason the deadlines and the pressure of the time of everything seems to have got very quick. And it's moved from such sort of being 2 seasons a year to 4 seasons a year to like now we've got mid-seasons in between. Now it's just a constant roll of consumption. And it's like, why have we got into this state of where we're just consuming? Because as a consumer, like, we're consuming all this stuff. We're not thinking about, there is now a designer now working like a ridiculous amount of hours, being pushed to the limit to meet this demand. That is it necessary? Like, is it needed? So this designer, it's like it is how leaders need to slow down. They need to think, do we need all of this all of the time, and with this amount like of deadline? There was one, going back to like toxic behavior and stuff, there was two people I actually spoke to that had this acronym of JFDI. And I was like, what's that? And it's like, whenever they got into a situation where they're like, we don't have the time, we need more time, they were told to just fucking do it in an acronym. And then the laptop will close and they will have to carry on. So it is intense, this actual demand for product that is just pushing everybody, and the leaders are pushing them. So they do need to be slow down. Do we need all of this consumption? It's not good for the planet anyway. We don't need it. Like, if I see another celebrity bringing out another line of something that looks like something else they've just done, it's just, think of all the workers behind all of these products. it's a lot. And then the leaders to those products are the ones push. We must do this. So to be a more positive leader and to notice your staff are working ridiculous hours, something's got to be wrong. And then they need to take the stand. They need to stand up and say, this is not okay.
What are some practical steps that fashion companies or individuals within the business in different hierarchies can take to create a healthier workplace culture, except of just being kind? Can you provide an example where you've maybe witnessed, hopefully you've witnessed, a successful transformation of a team or something where they have been changing to the better?
I would say I did work somewhere where the culture was very weird and tough in the beginning. And through my persistence of, I'm going to crack them, I just killed them with kindness. And I do think if you have a person, if you're that one person, it's almost like planting a seed. I know you've got to water it. If you're that person that just, I don't know, kills with kindness and just sees beyond all of this toxic behavior and looks at morale. I do remember looking at morale quite a lot and being like, okay, so as a team, we just get an absolute killing by the director for something that was not our fault. And we took it. But obviously then morale is hit quite hard. So then we would have to sort of, how do you pick yourself up? If you take that position as a person to be like, okay, I'm going to pick us up and I'm going to do something about this, you slowly change the culture in a more positive direction. It takes quite a positive person. How are you today? Like, what do you need help with? Can I help you? In a very competitive fashion environment, that doesn't happen. People don't help one another. And in my studies, it was the competitive nature was quite an intense thing. To change this competitive behavior, you need to offer help. You need to say, okay, do you need help? Do you want assistance with this? Can I count the buttons for you? Can I go get the zips? Can I, do you need help with this CAD? By just that little thing, just that tiny little thing of, do you need help, makes a massive impact to culture. If you're that one person, if you're just that one person that asks, then you almost planted the seed. You've planted the seed, and now you've just got to water it occasionally by going, everyone okay? Like, it doesn't hurt to be kind, and all of these people that are being very competitive, and which is not their fault most of the time. This is just the environment that they're in. If they see another way, and if you are the example of the other way, then it may go into a different direction, and it's worth the try. It really is. Like, with all the studying and the information out there regarding toxic work culture and how to change things, how to move things, it usually is there's a bad person regarding, say, a narcissist or a psychopath or one of those high level dark traits are usually the people that are in the higher positions. If you don't succumb to that, and then if you are in a situation where you are in this dark environment, then unfortunately, sometimes the only way is to remove yourself from this cult. If you cannot see, and you've tried doing the kindness and you've tried doing it, but this person keeps dragging it back into that dark area, then there is a point where you do have to move on. I've had really fortunate places I've worked where I've had a few amazing managers, and the one thing that was every day was we laughed every day. And even if I didn't really particularly like doing some of the work, however, I loved going in, sitting opposite my manager I'd had for like 10 years and just laughing, just at something she'd watched on the TV, something. She was just a really warm, open, friendly person. And I think she molded me into that warm, friendly person. She always sort of sat back, listened to the drama, and then went, does it really matter? Like, she was that person. And I was fortunate to learn from her. She was like a massive role model in my life. And yeah, it was just through her being kind, to being like, are you all right? You know? And that's what I will take with me. And that's probably why I've not altered when I've been in the dark company, that I won't go down that road. I can clearly see it. But when you're young and you've just entered the industry, sometimes you do not see it. Like, I did not see a lot of the, behaviours until you reflect back on it. You won't. So therefore, going forward to change the way leadership is so important for the next generation. And lo and behold, luckily, one of the people that I interviewed actually told me a story about a Gen Z who did not put up with it. She was asked to track a parcel beyond her hours of work, and she thought they were joking. And she went, I'm not doing that. Are you crazy? Like, I'm not going to track this parcel. You're asking me to work for nothing in my own time. She was like, no way. And she shut them down. And it was quite a revelation. Everyone was in awe of this young person, because I think that's where it's going, is the next generation don't want to put up with that. And I think eventually it will slowly die. But it's going to take a long time to get there. And in the meantime, there's people suffering with anxiety and depression and are being affected. So, yeah, it is slowly changing, but it needs to change a lot quicker.
Yeah, it's tough. It's kind of like, as you said, it's you need to find the right balance of gaining resilience and being strong. And also, for me, to be honest, like, I learned a lot of things what not to do. I lead a team now, and the way I approach this is to the opposite of most of my managers, because I want to do exactly different. I want to treat the people how I would have liked to be treated at the time. And I think I'm in a privileged position now where I do have a team and I can make my own rules and decide on how I am leading them. But it took so much resilience on my end, and also to so much kindness to not lose towards the toxicity. And it's such a great thing that you brought that up, because for me, like, I've been sitting here listening to you, reflecting on how I have been in oftentimes quite good teams, and it was always because we were kind to one another, and we were always like working as a team and not against each other. And that also, to be honest, like, we were the most successful team because we were working together. We were always having the vision and the focus and the goal in mind. And when you work towards it together, you get better outcome out of that. And that's in the end what the fashion industry, what they want. They want the best designs. They want the best selling designs. If you butt your heads together, you have ingenious people working in those businesses. Geniuses, absolutely amazing, creative, fantastic people who have so much potential and so much talent and so much resilience and so much strength. If you put these together and let them work together, that's amazing. Imagine what you can get out of that.
So productive. You get the best out of everyone if you do it this way. So it's kind of like not logical to want to work in this other way where everyone, I mean, there's a high staff turnover. Like, you're made to feel like you're lucky you've got this job. And, that's how you should feel privileged. I could replace you in a heartbeat. You're gone. And it's, but realistically, you actually have more productivity in a more positive environment. And there's studies out there to show this information. And it's like the fashion industry want to completely ignore this and do it their way. But why do we want to do it this way? Why is this way acceptable? Where did it come from that this is the right way, that we've done it this way for years. Like I have had a manager where I'd suggested a change and she just literally shut it down because she couldn't fathom that, but this is how we do it. And it's like, yeah, but everyone else does it like this. And it just could not compute at all. And it, you know, when you get people that don't want to change and move forward, then it becomes difficult. But it's definitely, if you're in a more positive environment, you do more. Like, you're safe. You know, if something's gone a little bit wrong and everything needs to be redone, you're more inclined to go, come on, guys, let's just, you know, we'll do it. Like, but when you don't like the environment, you're going to leave in a heartbeat. You're not going to continue to help out. You're going to leave unless you feel under pressure, and then your mental health will struggle. If you're under the pressure that you've got to stay and you've got to do this. I mean, I was speaking to someone the other day where if the designer was still in the company, no one could leave. Like, no one could leave for the day, because if you did, it was frowned upon. You know, that's, you know, really, is that what you want? You're obviously getting kicks out of everyone's there, staying there. But what are they doing? They're probably just looking at Google or something. They're not going to sit there and continuously be working. You're going to get less productivity. So I've never understood environment.
That's actually something that I had to unlearn after I exited the industry, working on the product, because I still felt like it was really fascinating, because my manager that I had afterwards, she was like saying to me, like, why are you always asking for permission to leave? And I didn't even realize that I was doing that. I was like, kind of like, yeah, so like, but also not, I didn't ask like specifically like, hey, can I go? I was more like, hey, like summarizing the day and over reporting. I was like, yeah, I've done that and that and that, and there's not much left to do. Everything else I need to do for tomorrow. And then sometimes my manager was like, why are you still here? Your working hours concluded like 2 hours ago. Why are you still here? Or we're like, well, if it wasn't pressing to be done tonight, why don't you go home? And I'm like, I don't know, can I go? And she's like, why are you asking me? You have your work hours, go home. Yeah, I felt like I needed permission to go. And that was crazy, because I took that away from, like, I learned that I habituated this toxic behavior where I did not value my time. I did not value my own time because no one valued my time. And that's actually such a terrible thing. So I had to learn to let that go and to develop resilience and actually learn from people who put up strong, firm boundaries and just stick up with them.
I can resonate with what you just said. Like, you get weird habits that you don't know until you go somewhere else or you do something else and someone says, what's that? You just don't know. You get into some sort of weird loop of habits. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I could totally resonate with what you just said.
It's so sad. I have a question for you. How can individuals develop resilience to cope with this kind of workplace stress and maintaining their mental well-being in high pressure environments like in the fashion industry?
So I got given some advice and this worked for me. Now, you could say this is complete mumbo jumbo, right? You could. So I worked with a QC, a garment tech, and I was going through such a hard time. I really wasn't enjoying the place at all. I was being singled out by a strange manager that was employed for like 10 minutes. So I walked into the building and she said, you know what you have to do before you walk in the building? And weirdly, this worked. She said, put a big pink bubble around you. Imagine you've got a bubble around you. And every negative thing that comes your way, it just bounces off the bubble. And weirdly, I'd see her at the door and she would do this kind of like close her eyes and then open them sort of all of a sudden and then walk in the building. And she was doing it. And so I tried it in a weird way, and it's part of energy work. And it weirdly worked for me to sort of repel all this negative energy. But I would say that you do need to have your boundaries in place. Like, is one of the key things. I think everyone from before, from the past, would not be able to say no. I think it's now getting to the point where it's okay to say no. You can say no and say, no, that's just not for me. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to go and pick up the samples at midnight in a derelict factory in the middle of Tottenham or somewhere. I'm not going to do it. It's okay to say no, where before it would have been like absolutely frowned upon to say no. I think with the next generation is quite clear on their boundaries. And I think through them being clear, it gives you the people that came before them the space to say, no, I don't want to do that either. I think you've got to set your clear boundaries to look after your mental health. You've got to take your time out. At the end of the day, it's like what I said, it's just clothes.
Yeah.
And you're making money for others. You're paying, you're doing all of this work. You're going above and beyond. You're doing all this so there's a guy that can sit somewhere in a jacuzzi or in a football box or whatever, living their best life. That's what you're doing it for. So I think you've got to remember, like, what is important to you? What are your boundaries? How can you protect your health? Because, it can deteriorate very quickly and you may not even realize it until it's too late. You can be, yeah, I'm fine. And then you're not fine. So you've been putting up this barrier and you're not really realizing it's actually bothering you until it's too late. So I would definitely make sure that you're creating yourself a safe space. You've got your boundaries and anything that can kind of help you sort of release the day. Like I used to run from work. I used to run to I just pick a point. I was training. I started running a lot after work because I just needed to get it out. Just remember in the back of your mind, just don't take it too seriously. And also, I think this is what led me to psychology is that, they've got their own problems. So the people that are being toxic or they're in a negative space, they might have something going on too.
Yeah.
They might have all of this going on in the background and they're under a lot of pressure because the CEO is the toxic person and they're just mirroring it because their self-esteem is low, their confidence level is been beaten by this other person. So you've got to kind of look past and look at the bigger picture and know that and not take it personally. So maybe look at them with a little compassion.
I was about to say compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they didn't get there just overnight, unless they are of the dark, the dark triad people, like of the narcissist and the psychopath or whatever, then, there is that case. However, a lot of the people that I've come across in fashion are like this because someone's been like this to them. And they're just repeating the behavior because they're in a state of anxiety and stress themselves.
Yeah.
So I always try and look beyond, and I think that protects my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So it could protect your mental health if you just look a little bit past the situation.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say your boundaries are probably the most important thing moving forward.
Boundaries, yeah. That's great advice. Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing that. It's also the 2 cents that I want to give to that. I know I could talk with you all day. It's absolutely amazing. Time is running out though. So the 2 cents I want to give to that is compassion, absolutely. Boundaries, absolutely, to summarize what you just said. But also, I understand for the listeners that this might sound quite unfair because you're not the ones who are causing this. But sometimes it's just the compassionate point of that is it is unfair and we have to cope with it and we have to figure it out until we're in a privileged position where we can change. And it also doesn't mean that if you are compassionate to other people and you're kind to other people, they might change their way because it's never too late to change. So that's my 2 cents to that. Killing with kindness.
It's always been my motto, and moving forward, because I've learned sort of how to diffuse sort of when someone's coming at you, and the diffuse. I've actually turned around and gone, "Are you okay?" Like out of the blue, like they're expecting a full-on screaming match with me, and I've gone, "Are you okay? Do you need a minute? I'll give you a minute." And they were just dumbfounded of what to do. And I just found that going forward was the better way to deal with it, you know, because every participant that I interviewed, they were on the stance of going back at them. Like, you know, unfortunately that was the natural reaction to give, was to go back at them or to go away and cry about it, or to get upset about the situation and say nothing. But for me, just to ask them, "Are you all right?" It just stumped them and threw them.
That's sometimes the best way to do it. So thank you so much, Kate, for sharing your unique insights and experience with us today. It's very tough to talk about these topics, but they're so necessary to be talked about. So time is running out. So now we do have a closing tradition on this podcast that every episode we challenge our listeners, which facilitates growth, intentionality, and awareness. Could you please introduce our listeners to your Style My Mind challenge? What action and mindset would you like them to embrace empowerment at their workplace?
I think to go up to someone and be kind. So give them a compliment. Give them, like, someone's having a hard time or someone's doing something crazy. Just go up, pick someone at work, and just go up, someone maybe that you've never spoken to before in the office, and just go, I love your top, or something. Just give them a compliment, or just be kind. So just be kind. So like every day for a week, just do it and see how you feel, and let us know how you feel.
I love that. That's such a fantastic challenge. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kate, I know you have a lot going on. So where can our listeners find you and your work, as well as learn more about what you do? And what are your aspirations moving forward as a fashion psychologist, and how can the listeners reach you through that?
So I'm currently undertaking a counselling course. So I will be trying to help people through, like, specifically fashion people, with their mental health going forward. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm mainly on LinkedIn. And I will be also having a Substack where we talk about all of these stories, because there's a lot more people with a lot more stories that I could not get to because I only had X amount of people that I could speak to regarding my study. The overwhelming response was sad. You know, like everyone had I had more than 50 people in a couple of days come forward with, like, you know, they're putting their hand up to speak. So I want to tell their stories. I want them to be able to, like, uplift it and just get it off their chest. So that would be something that I do going forward.
Fantastic. I will make sure to link what's available in our info box. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us and for paving the way forward to a healthier working environment in the fashion industry. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share, and do all of those beautiful things. Follow us on all of our social media channels, and visit our website for more insightful content. In line with the message of the story of the Double West brother, you are never bound to your past or defined by the decisions you have made before. It is never too late to change. So always keep your head held high, embrace your journey to empowerment, and be open to styling your mind. Thank you very much.